Join us on Tuesday each month for an interactive workshop led by one of GrowthCraft's seasoned expert advisors. Each session focuses on a specific topic tailored to the real-world needs of startup founders. From landing your first customer to navigating the journey from lab to launch, these workshops are packed with actionable strategies and deep insights drawn directly from the presenting advisor's area of expertise. Join our expert workshop series today by signing up for GrowthCraft membership at growthcraft.org/membership. We look forward to seeing you there. Hello, my name is Hassan Zarels. This is Tom Libby.
Welcome back, everyone.
And you are listening and, of course, watching the GrowthCraft podcast. The GrowthCraft podcast is designed with the startup founder in mind. This podcast is committed to growing your connections to our GrowthCraft advisors, increasing your engagement with the GrowthCraft community, and to growing your knowledge about all of the benefits that GrowthCraft can provide for your startup, for your project, for your dream, for your goal today and well into the future. And we can't wait to bring you along on our journey today. Now, usually here on the podcast, we interview startup founders, advisors, and others about their journey, their process, and of course, why they're involved with GrowthCraft. And today, we'd like to welcome to the podcast GrowthCraft advisor, Paul Zagaeski. How you doing, Paul?
Doing awesome today.
Awesome. So start off with our very first question. For our listeners and for our viewers, what is it that you do exactly?
My company, a sole practitioner called Zig Services. My friends always suggested that I should use my name in the name of my company, and I resisted it for many, many years, but eventually gave in. My nickname for many years was Zig or Zigzag. So Zig Services is a company that helps small businesses, startups, and individuals solve technology problems that are holding them back and give them ability to grow and expand and make their businesses more successful. Technology is both fixing things that are broken, but it's also planning for and making yourself capable to accomplish things that your business needs you to accomplish, either in a less expensive way or in a more streamlined and more efficient way, using technologies that are available. The basis of what I do really focuses on what is your business trying to accomplish, who are you trying to use as your conduit for connecting with customers, what problems or difficulties are you having, and how can we get around those, solve them, or find new ways for you to do things. I work with individuals who are work from home professionals who struggle to get their technology to work and support them the way they think it should. I work with small businesses who already have a technology in place and they're trying to figure out how do we use it more efficiently. But for the GrowthCraft community, I'm especially excited to work with startup companies who are beginning to map their journey as an actual company and really have no idea, what should I be using? And my real satisfaction comes from helping them figure out the answer to that question and then putting it in place.
So it sounds to me like it's a lot, right? Like this sounds like a very big ordeal. How did you decide to tackle this ordeal? Like, what was your catalyst that said, I just want to wake up tomorrow and start helping people solve technology problems? How did that happen in your brain?
My background is in the technology, I guess I call it being a business analyst in the technology industry, a specialized area of business analysis. I worked for some of the larger technology analyst firms in the industry. The last one that I worked for is a well-known company based here in Boston called Forrester Research. I was director of consulting projects for about 10 years there. When I left Forrester Research, I decided, hey, I really like working on these kinds of projects, but I'd rather do this as an individual. And for a while, it was kind of hard to get started because I picked an area of specialization that about 500 other consultants were all trying to do the same thing. This was the evolution of digital entertainment from radio and television to the internet. And there was an awful lot of competition around that time when this was first starting for how do you do this? What technologies will work? And what's the appropriate way to structure both the content and the processes for creating this kind of content? And, can we do it and make money at it? There were like I said, there were about 500 other people who were trying to do exactly the same thing. And I found out I can't really compete from Boston when all of the companies that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get answers to these questions, those companies are in New York or LA or Texas or Florida. So I eventually evolved my specialization away from that very niche focus and started to back into the same kinds of questions that I used to answer as an industry analyst. But as an analyst, I had to answer them for Fortune 1000 companies. I wasn't going to engage Fortune 1000 companies myself, but I can work with small businesses, medium-sized businesses, or individuals who are trying to answer those questions. So what gets me excited about that is people sort of assume technology is kind of like driving a car. You buy it, you put it in your garage, you turn the key, you drive, and you never have to do anything to take care of it. And of course, we all know that isn't really how technology works. You have to plan, you have to have a strategy for how you're going to accomplish what you want the technology to do for you and for your business and for reaching into your customers. And if you don't have information about how will technology help or not help, what roadblocks or dead ends you're going to run into, how do you do it with the least cost or the most efficiency? And then how do I actually train myself and others in my company to use all this stuff so that we can continue to be effective with it? If you don't have somebody sort of helping you figure out the answers to those questions, you will waste time, you will waste resources, you'll get frustrated, and you will do what many do. You will blame technology for your business not being successful. And that really is not a winning solution for anybody, the vendors who are selling this stuff to you, or you as the company trying to use this stuff. So being able to answer those kinds of questions, set a strategy, and then figure out how do we implement the plan, that really motivates me.
It's an awful lot to unpack there, Hasan. Good luck with your next question.
It's okay though. We're gonna start simple. We're gonna work our way in. I'm gonna cut and watch me slice this post-Thanksgiving turkey up. All right, so or post-football day turkey, depending upon your perspective. Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. We are recording this in the year of our Lord 2023, right? 3 years after the momentous events of 2020, with a virus of unnamed origin that came from an unnamed place in an unnamed country. We're not going to get into all of that. But as a result of that, I think the statistic that I saw was that something like at the height of 2020, at the height of lockdowns, social distancing, all of that, something like 60% of white collar workers were working from home, right? They were in a remote work environment. During that time, you couldn't get a microphone on Amazon to run a Zoom meeting, much less a set of computers or tablets to provide for your employees so that they could actually work from home. Now we're 2 years away from that. I'm not going to say that the heat has gone away, but I am going to say that I think various large institutions like the Fortune 1000s that you were talking about, including up to and including the federal government, departments of the federal government, which are also sort of included in that, have discovered that you can't put the remote work toothpaste back in the back to work or return to office tube. That's going to be the grounding for my question here. So for a person in your role, working with individuals who are maybe primarily remote, right? what are some of the challenges that you see with technological strategy mapping? And how can a startup founder who's coming to you think about this before they begin to engage with you? Let's kind of start there.
All right. So there for many years, and probably, continuing on, even if there hadn't been a pandemic, there had been an assumption that more and more business functions could successfully take place without people physically being in the same building with each other.
Mm-hmm.
The pandemic sort of proved that assumption or that theory that, in fact, businesses can run efficiently in ways that they maybe wouldn't have been willing to experiment with if they hadn't had their hands forced to do that. However, what it also revealed were all of the chinks and potholes and dead ends and difficulties that technology couldn't solve in terms of helping a business run with everything being dispersed, everything being in geographically dispersed areas. So for startup founders who are trying to figure out, how do I organize and operate a company when it's not just me flying the plane? I think some of the questions that you need to assess and answer honestly are, is it necessary for us, in order to be successful, is it necessary for us to be constantly interacting with each other, or do we do better as a company when people can isolate themselves and accomplish what is known as deep work, where they can focus their energy, focus their attention, and not be distracted by somebody walking down the hall and knocking on the door? Now, as a startup company, I think the assumption would be that most people are able to shift their attention back and forth between their deep work and then the interaction with others in the company or with customers or suppliers, that shifting can happen without too much disruption. But as your operation gets more complex, as there are more people involved and more events and more activities involved, those distractions become almost impossible to manage. So finding ways to isolate and sort of close the door virtually and focus your attention, that becomes actually pretty valuable. So one of the things that I think has emerged in this time of learning from the forced experiments that the pandemic brought to us, what we've learned are ways to create virtual closed doors, being able to shut the door on all of the distractions that can interfere with you or your team or a small group of people getting deep work done. I think some of the examples that I'll mention, one of the more famous applications that really came to the fore during the pandemic, that was sort of thought of as a panacea for solving all of the coordination and communication in an asynchronous manner when people are dispersed, was Slack. Slack became a gold-plated hit. Hundreds of millions of users using Slack in many, many thousands of companies, because the assumption was we need to have a way to synchronously stay in touch with each other. The asynchronous nature of email was not good enough. The asynchronous nature of sending a file and waiting for somebody to read it wasn't good enough. We needed to have a synchronous way to operate. That proved to be what's the right word? It didn't prove to have the value that I think many people thought it was going to have. Slack has ended up being too much of a distraction for most normal businesses to be able to focus their business functions on. What, you're waving your hand? Sorry.
Yeah, I got a follow-up question for that, because I'm glad
Sure.
you brought up the terms deep work, and you tied that directly to Slack. And as a person who's in the leadership space in GrowthCraft, and in the culture space, in the organizational management space of GrowthCraft, there's the technological answer, and then there's the cultural answer. And if you are transitioning a culture, and we saw this during the pandemic, and we continue to see this now, if you're transitioning a culture from being in person, where the interactions between people are what they are in, human to human in person, and you're going to switch that to a remote type interaction, there is a remarkable lack of understanding about the psychology underneath those interactions. And I would assert in your role, there's very often, and this is not your fault or my fault, this is actually the organization's fault, this is a leadership problem. There is a lack of understanding on the part of leadership about what's a technological solution versus what's a cultural solution. And so you saw this at the beginning of the pandemic, at the beginning of lockdowns, where managers were taking the same cadence of meetings that they'd had in person and just applying that to Zoom. And people were winding up with Zoom fatigue. You talk about Slack. I hate to tell you this. I was initially on Slack, but I initially put my team on Slack. I hate to admit this, but eventually we were like, you know what, we're done with this. Like, we could just go back to email, because, and it came to be too much, right? At a certain point. Why is that a truism? And I know why it's a truism from the psychological and organizational management perspective, but why is that a truism? This is my second follow-up question in the technological space. Because very often the tech guy and the org guy don't talk to each other. Like, we're separated in the organizational hierarchy and in the chart. We don't even have lunch together, which we actually should, but we don't have lunch together. So why is it that on the technological end that doesn't work?
I think that there is a distinction between the sense of how best to take advantage of a tool, a very powerful tool, particularly when you don't have a user manual that explains in detail, this is how to use this tool in a whole range of operational environments. For instance, with Slack, when you get introduced to the application, it gives you literally a plethora of ways to connect, interact, react to, collaborate with, but it doesn't explain which of these are actually going to work in your company. So what ends up happening is these extraordinarily powerful platforms, and I'm going to get to Zoom in a second because I have some positive things to say about it. These extraordinary powerful platforms become a playground. People start experimenting with them instead of getting work done. And even senior executives will experiment and start, announcing on a Tuesday, hey, we're going to do this process using, real-time synchronous communication over Slack. And everybody in the organization is going, wait a minute, I'm not ready. We can't. So not having a sort of a blueprint or a user's manual that really is focused on how this technology, which has all this great capability and technically is really sophisticated, how it's actually going to support the way your business operates. This is the key focus that I think we've learned that we have to maintain, and particularly true for startup leaders who are buying a subscription to a service or buying a license to a technology package and just stepping back and saying, it will solve all our problems. Just turn it on and start using it, and it will solve all our problems. So having a resource, somebody who has the expertise or experience to walk an organization through which switches do we leave turned on and which do we leave shut off, and then how do we actually modify the way our functional processes work so that people won't get frustrated by using this tool. Slack is a tool like anything else. If you use it correctly, it can help. There are ways that you can build collaborative, creative processes with synchronous communication using Slack, but they have really small window use cases. They're not, you're not going to run an entire marketing organization on Slack, but you can operate certain functions very efficiently if you do it in a collaborative way like that. Tom's shaking his head.
I'm shaking it
I'm
when,
laughing because
when you said you're not going to run an entire marketing organization on Slack, I'm shaking my head. No, I agree with you. There's no way you're doing that. Like,
but you might run an
was
entire sales organization on Slack. I just came from a webinar recently where the sales organization is selling a sales tool, which is basically a fancy CRM. They're like, "Oh, you're invited to our 50,000 person Slack channel," and I was like, "Nope."
Yeah. I was to say, so one thing that I noticed, I noticed really early, and it kind of goes along with the Slack scenario, because I'll get to my actual question in a second. But one thing that we did that I did within our organization is I designed a communication protocol, right?
Mm-hmm.
So every form of communication had time, tone, and something else. I forget what it is. Like, I should probably look it up before I said that, but we're on a podcast here and I'm not looking it up. But what I mean by that is every form of communication you have, whether it's text messaging, email, phone call, Slack channel, any form of communication had a protocol involved in it. Meaning, if I text you, I know that our communication protocol says that my text is going to be responded to in X amount of time with X number, like with this sort of business tone, and however, like, we really designed it so that no matter what form of communication you were using, you knew what to expect in return. Like, there was no, to your point, there was no like flooding of Slack because we assumed that it was going to be immediately responded to because it's a synchronous communication tool, right? Like, there was nothing like that. We said, if you're going to text me, here's if you're going to email me, here's the timeline that you're expecting us to return. It has the tone in which you're expecting the email communication to be about. So all that being said, I'm not sure how that ties into my actual question, but I was thinking because we were talking about Slack an awful lot, and you mentioned, can you give us an example, and not to make this an infomercial for you, because that's not my intent, but can you walk us through an actual use case of, like, here's how the person thought technology was going to help, this is where it failed, and this is how I kind of help them fix it, and this is the way they do it now, like, briefly. I mean, you don't have to go, this doesn't have to be a 20-minute thing. I'm just thinking of, like, just to give us a real true example of how your process works.
So the one that is most often cited in my experience, the one that I've had the most experience with, where expectation didn't meet reality and you really had to drag the two of them together, is customer relationship management, or managing customer data. Yeah. Almost every organization that adopts a customer relationship management solution assumes that it is going to solve all the problems the day you turn it on. Yeah. The assumption is based on the idea of, hype coming from the various marketing campaigns promoting these customer relationship management solutions, that you will automatically be able to reach out to all your customers. You'll hear back from them and keep track of what they say or how they respond. Your people, your salespeople or marketing people, will then be able to more quickly and efficiently meet their needs and understand what questions they have and how to answer those questions to persuade them that you are the best solution for their problem, that your solution that your company is selling. Now, where that is lacking is most organizations don't have people who understand how to translate the information that they have already about customers into information that they can use in that process of communicating, measuring responses, and then modifying the function or modifying the product or whatever you need to modify in response to what customers say. That is very sophisticated stuff. It isn't something that just you can't flip it on and say, okay, everybody's got email now, go start writing emails. It takes months, maybe years, to develop an effective way to take advantage of the capabilities of a customer relationship management solution. If you don't have that expertise in-house, you got to go find a consultant. Most of the CRM companies will offer you a consultant and a consultant capability. So working with a small organization that struggles, I'm trying to think of an actual example, but I can't think of one. So I'm just going to posit one. If a small organization knows that they've got a lot of information about customers, but there's a lot of holes in there and we don't have a way to keep it up to date, can you help us put something in so that we can keep track of it, communicate better, get responses and measure what those responses are, and then do something different based on the info we're getting from our customers. Walking through that process over a 4 to 8 month cycle is really the way I would help a small business begin to manage customer data and use it more effectively. You can manage it for various purposes. One would be, is our product good? How do we fix our product? Two, are we supporting our product and our service the way we should be? Are they having problems that we haven't, that we don't have information about? And then three, how do we get more money out of them? How do we get them to buy the next thing that we're offering, or the new version, or the upgraded capability? Where are the buttons that we need to push in order to get people to spend money that way? So those are the kinds of things that I would focus on with a hypothetical small business or startup business that wants to implement customer relationship management. It's not just about sticking a server in or subscribing to a web service. It's how do we implement this in our company with our people and our processes? Whoosh.
Well,
All right,
well, and also, I mean, you said people, your processes, but also with your end user, right? So if I am, let's take it away from Boston for just a minute. If I'm in a rural area, let's say I'm running a farm, right? Just for the sake of this conversation. And by the way, farms, high amount of technology is actually used in farming these days. Most people who live in urban areas just aren't aware of it. They're just not aware of how much technology is used in farms. But most of the technology, at least on family farms, is used to, of course, take the plants and the animals that are there and turn them into food for human consumption. Okay. And to do that in as humane a way as possible. But I've never met a farmer, and I sat on a board of a cooperative extension in upstate New York for about 8 years, and talked to a lot of farmers in my time. And I never met one of them, whether they were raising grapes or raising cattle, it didn't matter. I never met one of them that picked a piece of technology that didn't fit what they were actually trying to do, which was take the wine or take the grapes and take the cattle and turn it into either wine or beef. They understood what the end user was asking for. And if the end user didn't want what that technology was going to provide, they wouldn't buy the technology. Matter of fact, a technology wholesaler that I was talking to one time, he was having an incredibly tough time trying to penetrate the grape and wine market in New York, upstate New York, which is huge. Most people don't know that because none of the farmers one of the vineyard owners wanted to buy his piece of technology, his technology solution, because it didn't help the end user. So they had a clear idea all the way out to the end of the brand promise of what they were doing. I don't think a whole lot of startups have that. I think they bifurcate in their thinking. They're like, this is internal stuff just for us, but as long as we sell to the customer, it's fine. And it's that lack of thinking, I think, also kind of is where your services can really help, right?
Yep. I agree with that 100%. Your example, I think, is particularly apt. Humans have been farming for tens of thousands of years. We understand the process of creating food products and getting them to people who need to consume them, and then figuring out, was this something that they liked or didn't like? Do they want more? Do they not want more? Or do they want a different color, a different size or shape? That whole process is really well understood and is really benefiting from the efficiencies and the streamlined processes that are made possible by automated farming, by technology in farming. On the other hand, for many startups who are inventing a business, brand new product, brand new set of customers, the customers don't know they need this product. We have no idea how to measure whether they're successfully using it or not. All of that requires baby steps in terms of developing both the technology to deliver information and stuff and get feedback back from the marketplace about the technology and about the stuff, as well as how do we change what we're doing, the product itself, or the way we package it, or the way we talk about it, or the way we price it. All of that needs to be developed essentially from scratch for a startup company. You can't just assume. You have to put something out there and then test it, or really spend a lot of time designing and planning before you bring it to market for the first time. Um, One of the things I wanted to point out, which may be apparent from the way I've been talking about technology, even though I consider myself to be, quote, a technology expert, my expertise is really in business and how businesses use technology. It's less about, the bits and bytes and the hardware boxes. It's more about how can we use this to accomplish the thing that we think we want to accomplish, so that our customers will be satisfied and we'll make a lot of money. I want to get back to something I started to mention about before time runs out. The the scenario you suggested about, technology in the pandemic and how we started to use it. I use Slack as one of those that we thought was going to be great, and it turned out to have a lot of problems with it. The one that I think is actually kind of surprising, but shouldn't be a surprise, is video conferencing. People use the term Zoom now as a verb. When just before the pandemic started, Zoom as a company had a product out there. It was terrible. It was really hard to get your microphone to connect to your computer. It was hard to get your camera to connect to your computer. It was hard to stay connected over a network. You'd lose connections all the time. The screen would go blank and you'd have to, call people back again. Zoom came out of a bunch of, I can't remember if they were Google execs or what larger company they came from, but they were a bunch of guys who said, we think we can make video conferencing that will be business friendly. But for the first 2 or 3 years, it was anything but business friendly. When the pandemic hit, video conferencing absolutely exploded. If you look at a chart of usage, it's just a mountain. And Zoom had to rapidly fix all the problems that they were having. They didn't have the luxury of taking time to sort of figure out. They had to immediately come up with, why are we dropping calls? Why are microphones not working? How do we get more than 2 people on a screen at the same time? How do we let people manage that? What the result of all of that, I mean, you could sort of think of this as like, the way the US economy had to respond during World War II. It had to ramp up production to produce a lot of stuff that nobody had planned to produce. The result of that is that Zoom is now a hugely sophisticated video conferencing platform that's actually pretty easy to use. People still have issues with it, but it has taken the place of conference calls. People know. Do you remember every company had a conference call device in the middle of a conference room, and there were jokes and sketches on TV about conference call etiquette and people making faces during conference calls like that. None of that exists anymore, because now you can actually see people on the conference calls.
Seeing some of those SNL skits was absolutely like to die for. Some of those SNL skits were just hilarious.
So this is something that has actually evolved successfully, that was driven by the panic of the pandemic. The need for and the ability of video conferencing to actually meet a real business need, which allows organizations to run in a more dispersed manner and do it successfully, because people can actually have the face-to-face interaction that they would normally get when they sit around a conference table. It's not perfect, but it's better than, conference calls.
So I want to switch gears a little bit here, Paul, and ask you about what a typical engagement with you looks like and why you are the right person for the job. But I'm gonna phrase it. I'm gonna frame it for you, right? So
Okay.
So how does this work? I'm a small company. I want you to help me. Is it like you kind of give me advice and I go run with it? Are you more hands-on with the actual, elbow deep with? Are you shoulder to shoulder with the owner? How does that work? And is it like a project based where you're going to come on board for you'd basically tell the client it's going to take me X number of months to get you through this, CRM issue, or is it an ongoing thing where you're on board until you get it fixed and then you disconnect with it? What does that look like for the small business owner? And the subsequent question after that is why you? Why are you the right person to do that with them?
Okay, so I'll take them in that order. My typical way of working with a small business or startup, there are essentially three aspects to working with me. The first is we're going to agree on accomplishing what I call a business assessment. We're going to go through a process of understanding, how do you define your business? How are you doing it right now? Who are you doing it with? Who are your customers? What goals or objectives do you have for meeting the needs of those customers by producing a product or delivering a service or doing something else that customers will pay money for? And then where do you see yourself going in the next month, in the next 5 months, in the next year? Within all of that, where do you feel pain? Where do you feel like, oh my God, this sucks and I don't know the answer to it? Or where do you feel like there's like a black hole? I don't know the answer to this. Yeah, I haven't got there yet. Haven't reached the point where I need an answer, but boy, when I get there, I have no idea how to do this thing or accomplish this thing that I know my business is going to need. We're going to go through a 2 to 3 hour assessment conversation. And then from that, you'll get from me a written response that outlines all the things that we covered, all of the business objectives that you defined, the customer characteristics that you defined, how you're meeting the business objectives now or using technology to do that, and where you see your business going in the next month, 6 months, or a year. You'll get a written report with a list of items that I've identified as priorities. There may be 5 or 10 priorities that have emerged from that assessment conversation. Our second meeting, we're going to go over the assessment and then go over that list of priorities. And we're going to see, do you agree? Do you agree that these are the priorities? What changes or modifications do we need in order to really hone in on what your particular need might be? And once we've agreed on what the nature of those 5 or 10 priorities are, we'll decide which thing do we need to work on first. We'll come up with a list of action items that can be taken. We can take action on right away. That's the second step. Assessment is first. The next step is deciding how to work together. We can work together on what I call an as needed or ad hoc basis. If you buy time with me and then call me and say, I need you to come in and help accomplish this thing on the priority list, I'll come in and do it for the hours that it takes to do that. And we'll come up with some kind of agreement about how many hours it should take to do each one of these priorities on an ad hoc basis. The third way of working with me, and you can combine number 2 and 3 together. The third way is we're going to decide that 3 or 4 of these priorities can be met or solved by creating a project. And that project is going to have a beginning, middle, and end. It's going to have milestones and deliverables, and there's going to be a price associated with that we agree on ahead of time, with provisions for changing it in the middle if we realize that we need to, or adding onto it at the end if we realize that we need to do some work with that. So those are the ways that I work with organizations. This has proven to be highly effective for the companies I've worked with. The reason you want to work with me as opposed to working with a managed service provider who says, I will come in and take care of your technology. Managed service providers do not understand your business. They never will understand. It's not in their business model to understand your business. For me, it's absolutely essential that I understand your business model, because I don't want to waste time telling you or helping you figure out how to do something if in fact it's not going to help grow your business. So the difference between working with a standard management service provider, managed service provider, or even working with a consultant that specializes in one particular area, is that that person, that organization does not have the depth of understanding of what your business needs in order to be successful, and it isn't going to work as a partner as well as I am with you.
Sounds about right. Sounds
Excellent.
good. Sounds good to me.
Excellent. No, that was a good rundown. So we're rounding the corner here towards the end of our time together today, Paul. Typically at this point, we ask our guests, where can we find you? What are the best places to locate you? Where are you online? Website, LinkedIn, all that kind of good stuff. Tom's got a
Not yet. One question first. We can
Tom's
ask
got
that.
Tom's got one more question.
Well, no, because I want it to be about GrowthCraft, right? So
Yeah.
tell us what it is about GrowthCraft, and we can wrap this up pretty quickly with these two questions. But tell us what it is about GrowthCraft that attracted you, and why you stay on board, and what you love about being involved with GrowthCraft.
Well, I clawed and scratched my way into GrowthCraft. Nobody was willing to let me in for many, many months, but it took a while. And finally,
we barred the door and it didn't work.
I finally convinced somebody that, hey, you actually need somebody who knows something about how these technologies work to be part of the GrowthCraft team. So what is so exciting to me, all through my career, I've really enjoyed being on the inside and helping entrepreneurs and those who are, taking a more innovative approach, helping them figure out the answers to questions and doing so from the inside, rather than being a ivory tower expert who pontificates and writes reports and gives speeches. I love getting in and getting my hands dirty. So working with GrowthCraft startup members gives me the opportunity to formally and informally start to understand how do individual or specific startup businesses, how do they get off the ground? What business functions do they need to automate and streamline using technology? And what choices do they need to make in order to make decisions about those technologies and all the parameters that go with it, pricing and training, and do we have people internally who can run it, or do we need an outside provider who can run it? So grappling with all of those questions and working with startup members in the GrowthCraft community to find answers to those really motivates me. I love getting up every day, eating my startup Wheaties and trying to help companies figure those questions out.
Cool. Now go ahead, Hasan. Now you can ask.
Now I can ask you. Well, where would we find you eating your Wheaties? Where would that be?
All right. So I'm my best. Actually, I'm pretty. What's the right word? I'm pretty unaccomplished in terms of self-promotion. I do not have a book. I do not have a podcast. I post frequently on LinkedIn, but too infrequently, not as frequently as I should. My material appears both in my LinkedIn profile and on my GrowthCraft profile. You'll find the same material in both places. And my website is zigtechservices.com. You can reach me at paul@zigtechservices.com. Would love to talk to any or engage with any startup member in the GrowthCraft community, even if it's just to say hello and give them an idea of what I think about the technology needs that they have as they get their business off the ground. I'm in startup heaven right now, really getting to work with the GrowthCraft community members. So any opportunity I have to continue to do that, I'm really looking forward to.
Awesome. Well, we will have the links to all of those places that Paul mentioned in the show notes below the player on the platform you're listening to this podcast on. So click on those links to get a hold of Paul Zagaeski and get a hold of everything that he can do for you as a GrowthCraft advisor and for your business technology needs. Once again, I'd like to thank Paul for coming on the podcast today. Thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, friends.
And with that, we're out.
So long, everyone.